the king who locked up his wife. Look up at that towering spire. If you think it's a fairy tale, think again. A wife endured 20 years of torment within its walls, with no talking animals or magical long hair to rescue her. This is the story of King Philip II Augustus of France, a monarch described as hard as steel. But he had a reason to distance himself from his wives, a dark secret he would carry to his grave. Why would such a powerful king imprison his wife for 2 decades while openly engaging in other marriages and even having illegitimate children? His personal actions were irrational and incredibly cruel. This is the open loop we'll explore in today's video, a mystery that has lingered for centuries and continues to intrigue us even now. Let's delve into a controversial hypothesis about Philip II's motives, one that directly addresses the lingering curiosity many history buffs still harbor. In the famous 1966 play The Lion in Winter, playwright James Goldman offered a shocking speculation. Perhaps Philip genuinely disliked women altogether. This hypothesis has raised a big question about his sexuality, a matter rarely mentioned in official historical records. Evidence presented in the play and in some historical accounts suggests that Philip and Richard the Lionheart, King of England, once spent the night in the same bed at least once. This detail has made many historians pause and ponder. It hints at an entirely different facet of their relationship, going beyond mere political alliances. However, is this the only explanation for Philip's cold behavior towards women? An opposing viewpoint suggests that this event was simply a political maneuver. In that era, kings and princes often shared a bed as a symbolic act to solidify alliances between nations, much like a photo op of their time. It might have simply been a way to demonstrate closeness and commitment between France and England, a public performance rather than a deep emotional connection. So is this the real explanation for Philip's behavior, or just a story distorted over time to fit modern perspectives? Should we believe that a great king harbored such a deep personal secret, or was it merely a sophisticated political ploy? Leave your comments below and join this cultural dialogue. Philip II's life wasn't just about great wars or impressive reforms. It was also a series of personal tragedies, especially in his marital relationships. For the women who married him, the crown was not a symbol of power but an invisible shackle. Philip married Isabella of Hainaut when she was just 10 and he 14. Though it was a marriage that brought great dowry benefits, the vast county of Artois, it was far from happy. By the time Isabella was 14, Philip had grown dissatisfied because she hadn't produced a son. But the real reason Philip wanted to remove his wife stemmed from a war with Flanders. He was horrified to discover that Isabella's father supported Flanders. How could a king have a wife whose father sided with the enemy? In Philip's eyes, his wife was useless, and he had to get rid of her. When Isabella learned her husband wanted to discard her, she understood that only an extreme act could keep her position as Queen of France. So, she devised a desperate plan. Isabella removed her shoes, put on sackcloth like a penitent, and walked into a church. She sought the sympathy of the populace, hoping they would see the image of a barefoot queen in ragged clothes and allow her to retain her position. Could the populace be so easily manipulated? The answer is yes. A huge crowd converged on the palace, shouting and pressuring the king, forcing him to abandon his intention to dismiss Isabella, at least temporarily. This event was an aha moment, demonstrating the incredible power of the public even in feudal times. It reflects issues of power and justice, serving as a mirror to modern issues. However, Isabella's tragedy didn't end there. Although she finally gave birth to a son, Louis, in 1187, solidifying her position as queen, by 1190, Isabella gave birth to twins and unfortunately died due to childbirth complications, along with one of the children. Philip, who was then busy fighting Richard the Lionheart in Normandy, had a strange reaction. He quickly signed an armistice, rushed back to Paris, checked if Isabella was properly buried, then grieved for only about a week before immediately returning to Normandy. Incredibly cold, wasn't it? Just 3 years after Isabella's death, Philip sought a second wife. This time it was Ingeborg, the sister of the King of Denmark, perhaps because of her enormous dowry of 10,000 silver marks. But right at the wedding feast, Philip visibly showed discomfort, looking pale, and seemed only to want the ceremonies to end quickly. As soon as everything was done, he immediately acted, sending his new bride to a convent and heading straight to the Pope. He wanted to annul his marriage, which was only a few hours old, with the absurd reason that it had not been consummated. Ingeborg resolutely denied this, asserting the marriage had been formalized. Pope Celestine III at the time refused Philip's request, but Philip ignored the Pope's decision. Pope Celestine III at the time refused Philip's request, but Philip ignored the Pope's decision. 3 years after his strange marriage to Ingeborg, he married Agnes of Marania. This, of course, enraged the Pope because Philip now had 2 wives. When Philip continued to live with Agnes, the Pope issued an interdict against all Catholic rites in France in 1199 and excommunicated Philip, causing a major crisis for the French kingdom. Meanwhile, Ingeborg was held in extremely harsh conditions. She wrote to Philip about her terrible treatment, lacking food to the point of contemplating death. Instead of showing compassion, Philip simply moved her to another tower where she was not given enough food and was not allowed any visitors. This cruel imprisonment lasted for 20 years, a testament to the coldness and brutality of a powerful king. Philip II's brutality wasn't limited to his wives and children. He left many other stains on history, especially through his cruel anti-Jewish policies. Philip's father, Louis VII, had been very friendly and even protective of the Jews. But Philip had no such compassion. Immediately after ascending the throne, he confiscated all Jewish property, then forced them to convert to Christianity. 2 years later, in 1182, he went further by expelling all Jews from lands under royal ownership. To build a market in Paris, he destroyed numerous houses, all owned by Jews. But that wasn't the worst part of Philip's persecution. The peak of his cruelty was the burning alive of nearly 100 Jews in Bray-sur-Seine. This extreme act was not only a terrible stain on his reign, but also a painful reminder of the brutality that absolute power can lead to. When we look at these actions, history is not just a series of events, but also a mirror to reflect modern issues. We clearly see issues of power, justice, corruption, and the moral consequences of grand decisions. Can a king be praised for his contributions to the nation, yet be forgiven for his cruel actions against his own people? While Philip's marital life was filled with tragedy and controversy, another story unfolded with an ironic twist of fate, revealing the contradictions in his life. When Philip was searching for his second wife after Isabella's death, he set his sights on Margaret, a 13-year-old girl. She was en route from Geneva to Paris to marry the powerful king. However, along the way, Margaret's entourage was attacked by Thomas, Count of Savoy. Upon seeing Margaret, Thomas decided he wanted her for himself. He forcibly took her away from her father. Initially, Margaret was Thomas's prisoner, but then Thomas fell in love with the girl he had kidnapped. Ultimately, they married, had 14 children, and lived happily ever after. This irony is astonishing. While Philip, the powerful king, faced endless tragedies in his legitimate marriages, a marriage that began with violence had a happily ever after ending. This further highlights the contradictions in the life of Philip II, a powerful king who was yet helpless in finding personal happiness. Despite his cruel and controversial actions, Philip II left an indelible legacy for the French nation. He paved the streets of Paris and built the Les Halles market. Although Notre Dame Cathedral had been started before him, Philip ensured its completion. He also oversaw the construction of the Louvre, which at the time was not an art gallery, but a sturdy fortress. All these constructions were not only a great benefit to Paris, but also tourist attractions to this day. The University of Paris also received its charter from Philip, and Paris became the city of teachers, compared to Athens in terms of world civilization. He even organized the Battle of the Wines, promoting the French wine industry. Perhaps the greatest change Philip brought about was the map of France. Before his reign, France was only a third of its later size. With iron will and diligence, he reclaimed the lands north of the Loire from the English. This was an extremely important step, giving France access to the sea in the north and significantly expanding its territory. This shows that he was not just a tyrant, but also a great leader in terms of politics and national development. In September 1222, Philip fell ill. Believing he was nearing his end, he wrote his will. His illness lasted until the following year, and his fever worsened in the intense summer heat. When he felt a little better, he decided to travel to Paris. He died during the journey at the age of 58. Before his death, Philip had the opportunity to speak with his son, the future King Louis VIII. In his last testament, he instructed his son to treat Ingeborg well. It was thanks to this dying wish that Ingeborg was finally freed after 20 years of imprisonment and lived as the legitimate Queen of France. An unexpected ending, a last-minute atonement for a king full of contradictions, bringing final justice to a woman who had suffered so much injustice. So how should history remember a king with such a great but also brutal and contradictory legacy like Philip II? Can his immense contributions wash away his cruel actions? Or will his barbaric acts forever remain a blemish despite all his achievements? This is an opportunity for history to become a form of spiritual or cultural dialogue, inviting you to reflect.